Some people take the straight path in life. But at Arizona State University, we respect your twists and turns. They make our online students more driven to excel in their professional lives. That's why our personalized suite of services empowers you with innovative resources and staff that sticks with you. Make your next turn with one of our 300-plus programs at ASU, a top 10 university for online bachelor's programs. Tap to learn more or visit us at asuonline.asu.edu.
So, Michelle.
So, David.
We've got a guest today.
I am so excited for this guest.
I am so stoked.
I'm
like a little fanboy. Look at me. I'm fanning myself. Ooh.
I know, literally. You just keep sending me things that I need to read up on.
I know. I've been sending you all these documents, and you've probably read some of them.
No, I didn't read any of them, but that's okay because I'm a journalist. I know what I'm doing.
You're smarter than me.
Yep.
Because today,
yes,
we're talking to the CIA.
We are.
How much fun is this?
You're listening to I Spy, the distinguished career of Australian intelligence.
I've been around the world.
Have you?
I've done amazing things.
No, you haven't.
No, it's true, I haven't. But the guy we're talking to, man, he has done some shit.
Let's talk to him. Hello and welcome to I Spy. My name's Michelle Stevenson. I'm here with David Callan and we've got a very special guest. We're super excited to have this gentleman here.
This one.
I think everyone in I Spy land is going to be
They're going to enjoy this.
They're going to enjoy this. And if you don't, just add us at our Twitter account. What is it?
At I Spy Podcast.
At I Spy Podcast.
Yep, you'll find us there. Now, look, I'm not going to mince words here.
Okay.
We're talking to the CIA today.
We are talking to the CIA.
It's not the CIA that I slept with, all right? Which was an accident. I've said that already. It was an accident.
Yeah.
But no, it's not. We have got a former CIA officer.
We do.
Ladies and gentlemen, drum roll please. Marc Polymeropoulos. Marc, how are you?
I'm doing great. I have to say that you pronounced my name correctly, so
he's very good.
We're off to a good start.
I've spent a lot of time with a lot of Greek boys down here in Australia.
Now, Marc, you're coming at us from, where are you at the moment?
I'm in Northern Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C.
Okay,
nice.
Perfect. Now, you're a 26-year CIA veteran, one of the agency's most decorated field officers. Why don't you talk us through how you got into being in the CIA and what kind of led you there?
Sure. No, and actually, I love that. You know, everyone has a life journey.
Yeah.
And you know, people always ask me, you know, how does one get into the intelligence community? But let me just start with a quick joke about my name. I got to say this.
Okay,
because,
good.
You know, I was a deputy station chief in the Middle East many years ago. And I got a call on our secure line from our briefers, for the briefers who were going down to see President Bush, George W. Bush, and they wanted my take on a certain situation. So I give that to them. It's a pretty big honor. I mean, this is, you know, I'm 7,000 miles from Washington, D.C., but the President of the United States is going to hear my analysis on a situation. So they told me to wait by the secure line. So later that night, as I'm waiting at the embassy, I got a phone call, and they said they were just back from the Oval Office. And I said, well, what did President Bush have to say? He said, well, the meeting went great because the whole time he was trying to pronounce your last name.
So
anyway.
Definitely not used to hanging out with Greek boys.
No.
But okay, so you know, my life journey, and you know, I like talking about this for a couple reasons. But first and foremost, you know, it's to kind of dispel the myth that, you know, we're not superhuman. You know, if I went to the grocery store, you know, around the corner from you, you wouldn't tell one way or the other if I was a intelligence officer. But you know, so I was born in Greece. My dad was Greek. My mom was American. My dad was doing his conscription, his mandatory service after he got out of graduate school. So they went back to Greece. My mom was pregnant. I was almost born on the Greek island of Mykonos, in fact.
Nice.
Not a bad place to be born.
No. My mom went into labor, flew back to Athens. But I mentioned that because for every summer after that, we went back to the States after very quickly, but I used to go back to Greece every summer. My dad was a college professor. That meant for 3 months he had off. So I traveled constantly my whole life. So I had this kind of sense that there was a bigger world out there. But one key moment for me, which I think led me to my kind of really interesting profession, was when I was 10 years old. My father went off to Algeria, you know, a country in North Africa, obviously, to do a sabbatical. He was teaching there. And my mom, and just think about this for, you know, if people have kids now, I have kids, I wouldn't have done this, but she put me by myself when I was 10 on an airplane at JFK Airport in New York City, flying through Paris to meet my dad in Algiers. And then my father and I, for a month, drove 2,000 miles through the Sahara Desert in a Volkswagen minibus.
That's awesome.
And I thought I was Lawrence of Arabia. I was Lawrence of Arabia. That's it. Done.
That's a
And
huge
so, you know,
adventure.
look,
For a 10-year-old,
yeah, what an adventure.
Yeah, totally. But
yeah.
those were the days, like I remember as well, when I was younger, you saw more kids flying solo.
Yeah.
Like it was more
Right.
of a thing that you'd put kids on flights and no one really thought anything of it. Now everyone's so petrified that things going to happen.
I do it with my kids.
That's right.
They keep coming home. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
That's right. So, but it's the sense that I wanted something more, and I loved reading novels by James Michener. There's a novel he wrote called Caravans about a young American Foreign Service officer in the post-World War II period in Afghanistan. And so I was mesmerized by Afghanistan. Well, amazingly enough, I read this, probably when I was, 12 or 13 years old. Then later on in my 30s, I'm, one of the teams that went into Afghanistan after 9/11, sitting cross-legged across from a village elder in Helmand province. And I'm thinking back, holy cow. I mean, I read this book years ago about Afghanistan. And so I think that's the life journey I went on. And I wanted to do something different and wanted something more. And I was in university at Cornell University in upstate New York, and the CIA came recruiting, and I was interested. I put in my application. Took a long time to get my security clearance, but it's the only job I ever had. So it's a good thing I'm talking to you now, because I'm not sure what else I'm qualified to do in retirement.
Oh my God, you two have similar life parallels, except David found his way into ASIO through a
Being
bus.
an idiot.
No, wasn't it didn't you find a number on the bus shelter?
No, not quite. No.
But
No. It wasn't that classy.
no. So anyway, you've led teams all over the world. You've conducted some of the most important operations in the Middle East and beyond. I mean, your expertise also lies in counterterrorism, which we're really fascinated with, and covert action and stuff. So first off, you're in the CIA. How do you decide where your focus is going to be? Because I'd imagine it would be pretty broad, right?
Right. So I had actually a kind of unique journey, again, from the beginning. So I was in graduate school when I was recruited. I'd written my master's degree thesis in Algeria. And so I was actually recruited by the analytics side of CIA. And so I entered in 1993. But after several years and doing multiple trips to the Middle East, I wanted to switch over to the operational side. And amazingly enough, I went to my boss on the analytics side at the time, a guy by the name of John Brennan, who of course later became director of CIA.
Yes.
And I said, look, I don't, I think I want to be a case officer. I want to be an operations officer. I wanted to live overseas. I had the right kind of personality and makeup. And he said, yeah, no problem. You can transfer over. And I joke about it with him later on, even now, because he didn't really try to keep me on the analytic side. I probably was a really crappy analyst. But to his credit, he wanted to keep me in the organization. So then I went to the training kind of cycle, the evolutions to become a case officer, which is a 1-year program. And so off I go there. Look, I had spent a lot of time, writing and thinking about the Middle East. I had actually started learning Arabic. And so it was pretty obvious that was the region of the world where I was going to go. And then frankly, as this starts to become the late 90s. And, the really kind of the notion of counterterrorism and the rise of Osama bin Laden was on our radar screen. Remember the U.S. embassy bombings happened in 1998.
Yeah.
In the embassy bombings in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam. And so this was something that I wanted to do. And of course, then for everybody, 2001 changed our lives.
So you were pre 9/11. You were in the CIA before.
Yeah.
Obviously 26 years. So yeah.
I went in 93. Yeah.
Yeah. So wow, 93, the year I left ASIO. You are my replacement, and it looks like you're a lot more effective.
Yes.
So yeah, you went into this. You started. So you were an analyst for about 2 years. Then you moved into operations, and then of course the big flip happens with 9/11.
Right.
And I mean, we're still watching the effects of that ripple down through the line even now.
Sure.
But it also said you were working sort of in clandestine ops in Europe as well, which I'd be interested on your take in what's going on in Europe right now, considering the clandestine operations that you were working on and the way Russia has just pushed holus bolus, its intelligence operation, into the European sphere.
Sure. So let me kind of define my career was in counterterrorism. Yeah. And I spent almost 12 years living and working in the Middle East, and then a lot of time, almost 3 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. Yeah. And some in war zone operations, which was purely counterterrorism. But the end of my career, it was really interesting. So this is 2016 and 2017, obviously Russian interference in the U.S. elections. And so what the CIA leadership decided is they took a whole bunch of folks like me, and I'd been promoted to the senior intelligence service. So it was like the general officer class in the military. Yeah. But I had my whole career was in the Middle East, but I'd been involved in covert action and being, kind of fairly aggressive, more aggressive than other elements of the agency. But they took a whole bunch of us from the Middle East shop and the counterterrorism shop and put us on Russia and Europe. And it was primarily after Russian interference, but it was the idea we're going to push back on Russia.
Okay.
And it's not the same thing. We're not running find, fix, and finish operations. Although I can make a very strong case to do so. That's in my dreams. But ultimately, it was really working with our partners overseas to expose Russian malfeasance. Russia saw Europe as its playground. Whether it's election interference, assassination operations. I mean, they were running roughshod everywhere. And so it was our job to kind of work with our friends and allies to expose them. And that there's some nobility in that. There's when you walk into CIA headquarters, there's on the right is our memorial wall, which is sacred. These are the stars on the wall where our officers have been killed in the line of duty. On the left, though, there's a biblical verse, and it says, "And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." And so ultimately, it's the idea of exposing Russian malfeasance, but telling the truth. This isn't propaganda. It's exposing the Russian activities worldwide, and that's something that I think we did back then, and clearly they're continuing to do now as well. It's almost a model of how to kind of counter Russian hybrid warfare is to expose what they're doing.
Can I ask, considering you're an intelligence officer of 26 years, you've got a really good handle on the entire intelligence community. How disappointed are you in the seeming lack of professionalism in the Russian intelligence organization, in that it literally seems like it's peopled by cowboys?
Well, I'm enjoying this immensely. In fact, Russia is our enemy. There's no doubt about this. This is, and so what I think has been really interesting is to see, and it goes across the board for kind of the Russian security services and the military. It's a Potemkin village. I mean, it's a Potemkin army, a Potemkin village. We had built up this kind of mythology that the Russians were 10 feet tall. The Russian military has been a catastrophic failure, but so is the Russian intelligence services, in particular the FSB, which the internal service, which for some bizarre reason only in Russia was actually in charge of the Ukraine file.
Yeah.
But they failed miserably in Ukraine, and ultimately making the huge mistake of not providing Vladimir Putin with accurate intelligence. And so the notion that I think that while Western analysts saw that Kyiv could fall within 36 hours, and we were wrong about that because we really kind of overestimated the Russian prowess of the Russian military. But at the same time, I think that the Russian intelligence service were telling Vladimir Putin that would happen as well.
Yeah.
And so this has been a spectacular failure by this, once vaunted defenders of the state. And I just say I think a lot of my colleagues and I, take some satisfaction on that, because I never thought the Russians were 10 feet tall to begin with. It was just a matter of the West never really kind of fought back, never countered them in a proper fashion.
I think it's also a case of, the whole Hollywood syndrome, in that they were portrayed as Dolph Lundgren and they actually wound up being Mr. Bang. I mean, they just became that
right.
sort of, a ridiculous, they became a parody of themselves to a great degree. And I think also, as you say, Putin's intelligence weren't giving him the information because they probably didn't want to give him information that would upset him. I think that's the other point.
That's the classic dilemma of being an intelligence officer in an autocratic regime. If you tell the truth, you might, fall out of an apartment window.
A lot of that happening at the moment, particularly in the oil industry. Do not be an oil baron. Not a good place.
I do want to go back, though, to talking about your time in Afghanistan and also looking at kind of the time around 9/11, because, these were really complex periods in politics as well. We saw, with Clinton, he kind of overextended what was happening. There's the bombing of the Sudanese factory that kind of everyone's attributing to blowback for September 11th. What do you think was the role in American foreign policy in terms of, kind of seeing that rise of Osama bin Laden?
Sure. So what a great question. I'll tell you that in this, again, my career has been so interesting in that, and this is what I used to tell young officers when they would come into the intelligence community. I said, you're going to be a witness to history. And I don't know if I was lucky. I don't know if I raised my hand all the time, but so many kind of seminal events I happen to have been there or participated in. But I remember in 1996, on the analytic side of CIA, we wrote an analytic paper about the rise of the Afghan Arabs. Now, what was that? Those were the Arab Mujahideen, the Arab freedom fighters who fought against the Soviets, who then, there was this idea of blowback. So the war in Afghanistan is winding down. So all these really kind of extremist fighters are now spreading out around the globe. But in this paper, there was a little appendix, and it was about a young Saudi financier named Osama bin Laden. Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think that, it took 9/11, a catastrophic attack with 3,000 Americans killed, for America to become serious about counterterrorism. And I'm brutally honest when I talk about this, and I talk about it all the time. we had to almost adopt kind of the Israeli model of going after and killing our enemies and being comfortable with it. So there was, the United States, through very legal means, but through covert action, decided to undertake the intelligence community and the U.S. military a targeted killing program where we're going to go and kill as many al-Qaeda members as possible, both the foot soldiers and the senior leadership. Yeah. That wasn't done before 9/11. It wasn't even contemplated. So there was a huge paradigm shift to take offensive action. And I think, this was something that I was very intimately involved in. I'm actually fine. I'm proud of it because I think that's what you have to do with your enemies. And, what I tell people about this, and, you could, take it or leave it. I was on the ground in Afghanistan when we were scooping up al-Qaeda prisoners. So I saw these hardened al-Qaeda members, who were on the run. This is in maybe early 2002. And in debriefing them and looking at them, if they had the chance, they would gut me, you, your mother, sister, brother, and your entire neighborhood. Yeah. These were hardened terrorists. There's no, process of kind of rehabilitation. And that, when it comes to that, and you understand that, and we are in a war with them, the idea, I think, in the sense of killing them before they kill us becomes a little more palatable. And again, this is not nothing new. This is the policy of the United States government that became extremely aggressive. And I think that, ultimately, and I look back and we could talk about kind of the 20 years in Afghanistan and all the kind of some of the mistakes that the United States government made. But the fact of the matter is there was not another attack on U.S. soil. And I think there's something that the intelligence community can be proud of. Yeah, I mean, look, there is no doubt there were mistakes made, but at some point too, there's a global responsibility. And for a very long time, America felt that was their thing, that they had the global responsibility to jump in and try and fix things. But what we've seen is whenever they tried to fix things, it quite often didn't turn out the way that you would like. What do you think would have happened if there were moments where America just kind of sat back and watched things unfold instead of jumping in and helping? Well, I think, we had no choice, in my view, in terms of kind of the invasion of Afghanistan. Whether we had to stay there 20 years is another whole story. And, we started ending up, conducting nation building. But ultimately, we had to invade Afghanistan. Afghanistan was a safe haven, for al-Qaeda. And we had to kind of track down the al-Qaeda members as they were fleeing. So I have no problem with that. You're right. A lot of these conflicts, and I think about Iraq, and forget the whole issue about weapons of mass destruction. And I spent a lot of time in Iraq. I went in on the infill. I went in with special operations forces into Baghdad in early 2003. But aside from the WMD issue, there is a nobility in what the United States tries to do in terms of saving people from repressive regimes. I think people forget. And I worked Iraq operations before the invasion. And so Saddam Hussein's regime was extraordinarily repressive. Yeah. The brutality in the human rights record was an abysmal human rights record. So you're trying to do good, but often what happens in the United States is these things backfire. And I think that there is more of a realization now that, things such as regime change, and even when we have some noble intentions, maybe we should kind of undertake a different path. But I do feel, and look, I think this is shared with our allies, whether it's in Australia or in Europe, there's a desire to do good. Sometimes, though, it certainly backfires. On that, once America went into Iraq, once Saddam Hussein was gone, there's the power vacuum that's occurred. Do you think that has emboldened countries like Iran? They seem to have pushed pretty heavily into northern Iraq, and their work in Syria, Hezbollah, and also down in Yemen. So, in effect, do you see Iraq stabilizing at any time soon? Because there was, earlier this year, there was quite a lot of uprising going on, particularly in Baghdad. Oh, sure. Look, one can make an argument, and again, that's probably can be discussed even in a different program, that the U.S. invasion of Iraq caused, kind of a destabilization in the region that has really far-reaching effects. In terms of, where we are with Iraq now, the ideal is for Iraq to be as stable and democratic as possible and to reduce the Iranian influence as much as possible. That is a very tough goal. Yeah. And again, Iraq, I think we look at Iraq now in a much different light. Iraq now is just part of the United States, and with our Gulf allies, certainly the Saudis and the Emiratis, but it's this desire to push back against kind of Iranian encroachment in the region and Iranian malign activities. And so Iraq, I think, is looked in a much different light. It's part of the struggle with Iran. Yeah. And again, that's the Iranians have certainly have an interest there. Iraq has Shia population is certainly there are elements that are wildly pro-Iranian. But the idea, what I think is sad is, and we can kind of talk about the pros and cons of this, but there's a lot of American and allied blood shed in Iraq, and I'm not sure there's it's going to turn out as great a result as we had hoped. It certainly hasn't.
The investment in treasure and human life is quite substantial, and unfortunately at the moment the results don't seem to be.
But let me say one thing. I think it's important to note. So we're talking about big picture stuff here, but that wasn't my life.
Yeah.
My life was a case officer, and so I had a 5-meter target in front of me at all times. So when in terms of what I get up in the morning, if I'm in Iraq or Afghanistan, there's a certain task I have to do. Maybe we're hunting a high value target. Maybe I have a recruitment target in front of me, an Iraqi regime official, or and so it's, I don't think about those big picture things. You do so perhaps later when you're more senior in your career, but at that time you're thinking about what goals that you have. You're thinking about the men and women to the right and left of you, getting them home alive. You don't really think about politics and about kind of big picture foreign policy when you're in essence a street case officer in these regions. And by the way, that's to me that's what I miss the most. My job was to understand a country and a culture more than anyone. One of my proudest moments, and I unfortunately can't say which country it is, but Nancy Pelosi, obviously, is a historic figure in U.S. politics, and I can't even remember what position she had at the time. She was majority leader, Speaker of the House, but she was visiting the Middle East, and she came to a U.S. embassy where I was the deputy station chief. She went to the ambassador. She said, "Who's the smartest person in this country?" And they said, "Go talk to Mark."
Oh no!
That's
and
amazing.
To me, it's because I was on the street all the time.
Yeah.
I never sat in the embassy, and so and I remember when she left, she gave me a big hug and a kiss. And I kind of laugh at that in my career, but ultimately that's the statement I'm more proud of than anything else. And that's what I would tell younger officers when we were serving overseas is you want to be the smartest person in this country.
Yeah.
Period. So I want you out in the street. If I see you, in the office a lot, something's wrong.
When you earn your degree online at Arizona State University, you get everything the nation's most innovative university has to offer. The same internationally recognized faculty, the same nationally ranked programs, the same degree. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
So with your time over there and like being on the street and, not thinking about the big picture stuff, kind of like doing the day-to-day stuff, was there a lot of pressure on you? Did you feel kind of the weight of the things that you needed to do or the tasks? And what did that do for your mental health?
Oh, what a great question. And it's something I talk a lot and I work a lot in that space on mental health now. Because ultimately, so I work with especially with U.S. law enforcement on this issue because I think there are many of the similarities in terms of pressure. So what does that mean? So, well, first and foremost, it depends where I was. But talking about in conflict zones, first of all, there's in Afghanistan, for example, I ran one of our paramilitary bases along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. And there was a kind of a very kind of, it's going to sound terrible when I say this, but a beautiful simplicity in this. I wasn't there to dig wells. I wasn't there to win hearts and minds. We were there to track down, find, fix, and help the U.S. military finish Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. That's it. That's what I did every day for an entire year. And the pressure on that was pretty simple, perhaps kind of two pieces of it. One is to get the men and women under my command home safely. We were rocketed every day. I never had an alarm clock because at 6 a.m., from across the border in Pakistan, Al-Qaeda would be firing 107 millimeter rockets at us. I would talk to my family on a like this, and the whole room is shaking. So it was getting my family home. And the second was the pressure was to find, fix, and finish Al-Qaeda and the Taliban before they killed more Americans. Yeah. Either American soldiers or conduct attacks. So I felt an enormous amount of responsibility in that. But there was a simplicity in that. And so, what I tell people, and again, is, I had a lot of experience in conflict zones like this, but my experience in Afghanistan was much different than the U.S. military, the Australian military, the British military, where you're scratching your head and you're wondering, what am I doing here? We're training these Afghan forces. They don't care. My brothers and sisters are getting blown up. Like, what's going on? For me, it was much different. It was singular focus. We were very successful. I was very proud of what we did because we're helping, or we're pursuing that counterterrorism mission. And so for me, the war was different. Now, it's still a grind over a year. And so kind of the mental health aspect is really important. I would tell my officers under my command, and I've done so even till today. And when I talk and I read on leadership is, taking care of you. There are things you can control. you get up in the morning, you hydrate, you eat right, you exercise, keep in touch with your family, you meditate. I mean, all the, there's, there deep breathing exercises, because those are things you can control, because there's going to be a lot of variables, a lot of uncontrollables during the day, and some of which, could lead to loss of life. And, for me, that kind of the mental health aspect is something I learned really later in my career, but it's really important.
That's really fascinating, because I find it so interesting that for many years, a lot of people like yourself were in the field working these jobs, and no one really thought about the mental health aspect. And like now, it's like everyone talks about it, like, oh yeah, people would have been under a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting that you were probably there in a time of extreme circumstance around you where you really needed to get stuff done. So when Osama bin Laden was finally shot and, taken out of action, and then also more recently with his 2IC.
Zawahiri.
Zawahiri, that's it.
How important would that have been for you, even though you're not involved as so much now with al-Zawahiri? How important would that be for everyone to kind of see that outcome?
So, the hunt for bin Laden to me was fascinating. First of all, I remember I was in a weapons course getting ready to go to Afghanistan when he was killed. And my first reaction was, this is incredible. And my second reaction was, damn, I missed it. But there still was, just cutting off the head of the snake doesn't mean there's not more work to do. So clearly there certainly was. The Zawahiri strike was deeply emotional for me and for a lot of people, because this, that's Al-Qaeda number 2. But and I've talked about this, and it's been quite open in the press. The hunt for Zawahiri in particular, brings out a lot of emotions because we ran operations to find him. And in one of those operations, which I was involved in, and I can't really talk about how I was, but I was involved in, led to the events in Khost on December 30th, 2009, in which 7 CIA officers were killed. That operation, in which a double agent betrayed us and blew up 7 of my colleagues, was designed to find Zawahiri. And so the Zawahiri strike in the end, I think, brought to some closure, a really terrible moment in CIA history, and one that, that I'll I think about every day, because I find myself, somewhat responsible for what occurred. I was heavily involved in it. I lost one of my officers. And I'll never forget having to stand up in front of 400 colleagues and tell them that this officer was killed, and people literally dropping and crying and howling, and then dealing with this officer's parents and loved ones. And so, it becomes very personal. So Zawahiri really offered a lot of closure to a lot of us. And it was a great moment. You can talk all about, there's a lot of smart people in the counterterrorism world, academics and others who, talk about the importance of this or not. I feel a little differently that it was just, it was closing the chapter on someone who as we were trying to find him, there was some real tragedy along the way.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Now, I have been following you on Twitter.
Oh God, sorry.
No. It's been fascinating. I've learned more about the Boston Red Sox than I think I really needed to know. You're obviously a big fan.
Right.
Personally, I'm a cricket tragic, so I kind of share the baseball thing.
Yeah.
The cricket's kind of
a ball and a bat, basically.
Well, it's baseball with lunch.
Okay, let me tell you about cricket. So, but I would watch cricket in all my times, and so, all the South Asian channels would have cricket on all the time when I was in the Middle East. And I would sit there, my friends and I at the embassies would sit there, and we said, I obviously could have gone online or read the rules, but I said, I'm going to try to figure this out on my own. And I was there for years and never was able to. And it drove me crazy.
Look, if you ever come down, I'll take you to a match and explain it to you. But I did have one question about you. I'd noticed you had made a few comments on what's going on with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, really, how do you think it's affecting the intelligence community?
Great question. So look, this is something that, of course, this is enormously political. And I have a kind of a unique space now where I write a weekly column on intelligence for the Washington Examiner, which is a conservative paper.
Yeah.
Yet I'm also a paid analyst for MSNBC, which is a very liberal network. So it's perfect because everyone's mad at me all the time. So that's a good place to be. But look, I would consider myself one of those who are the never Trumpers. Look, I worked for the CIA for 26 years, so I'm not a bleeding heart liberal. Yeah. I think a lot of people on the left might be a little upset with some of the things I've done in my past. But I think Donald Trump, did extraordinary damage to the United States, not in terms of policies necessarily, but just in terms of his lack of respect for democracy. And January 6th was really truly a dark moment, I think, in our history. But when it comes to what's happening, recently with the idea of, what conceivably he could have taken home in terms of classified documents to Mar-a-Lago, that really kind of gets to the core of my old job, which was running human agents, running sources. And so because, and to me, and it's worth noting this, the most fun part of my job, the most challenging, what I miss, of course, it's the camaraderie of my fellow colleagues, but in reality, it's the agents. And an agent, of course, is someone that we have recruited. It's a foreigner, it's a Russian, it's an Iranian, it's a Chinese intelligence officer. But when you would sit down with this individual, maybe you're the recruiting officer, maybe the handling officer, but make no mistake, if you're running someone of those nationalities, their life is in your hands.
Yeah.
And you have this relationship, which is extraordinary. They're looking at you and saying, Mark, if you screw up, I'm going to die. There's no other profession like that.
No.
And so, and when I talk about tradecraft, and of course, you all know what this means, is I have to be perfect in my surveillance detection routes and how I keep this agent safe. And so what Donald Trump has done in kind of, with his haphazard at best, handling of classified documents, certainly not wanting to give them back, and perhaps there's more nefarious reasons, but he's violating that trust that we make with our agents, because I'm sure there's a case officer and an agent sitting in a car somewhere overseas, and the agent's saying, hey, what the hell? Like, you told me you'd protect my identity. And there's classified documents that have spilled all over this country club in Florida. And so I think that for me is where it's most damaging. It's a lack of respect for kind of the core foundational work that I did, which is that I had someone's life in my hands, and I promised to keep them safe. And so, I think that's why this kind of, hits a nerve with me.
Yeah. And I think what we did see was there was a number of CIA agents who have been taken out, and they're saying that it possibly is linked to some of the stuff that Trump has kind of released.
And I'm very careful on that. I don't make that jump.
Right.
And so what I really try to do is not do that. I don't know. And of course, because there's going to be a damage assessment done by the Director of National Intelligence. That's really good. We need to see what happened. We need the FBI investigation to go forward. What you're referring to are is reports that we lost, both Iranian and Chinese agents.
Yeah.
And apparently we did. I don't think we can kind of link that to what Trump has done. And I think by doing that, in essence, if that's proven not to be the case, then Trump will say, see, it wasn't so bad. So what Donald Trump amazingly managed to do is to get off all the time, because we accuse him of doing these worse things when that doesn't happen, and he's done really bad stuff. He just kind of washes his hands, and we all kind of forget about it. But look, the investigation has to continue. I'm keenly interested in where it goes.
Yeah, no, it's very fascinating. We've been watching it. I mean, and from a security perspective, I mean, not so much CIA, but probably more FBI. But like from a homeland security perspective, like a lot of the stuff that's going on with the United States internally must be really difficult to watch.
Well, of course it is. One of the things is, it's January 6th, I'm watching that and I'm thinking, well, wait a second. I used to be the one reporting on this from other countries.
Yeah.
I mean, this is madness. And I really believed in the old adage, and I guess it was John F. Kennedy who talked about America as the bright, shining city on the hill. And that's how we recruited people as well. No matter what problems that were going on in the United States, you tell someone from Iran or China or Russia or Pakistan or other places is that, America offers something better. And then you're seeing people, violating the Capitol. And to me, that was incredibly hard to watch. And look, I mean, the FBI has been very clear that, there's more of a threat of domestic terrorism in the United States than there is from overseas. Let me throw one thing, though, back to the document dump at Mar-a-Lago. Another, which I have talked about quite often, is I think our foreign liaison partners are watching this because we don't know what was in those documents. The fact of the matter is your government shares a lot of secrets with us.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be the station chief in any country having to go to the head of the service and say, hey, by the way, you know what? Some of your stuff was taken by Trump. That's not a good conversation to have. You don't want to do that.
No.
And so I think that I'm sure our foreign partners understand under the Biden administration things have changed, but Donald Trump could win the presidency again. So would, for example, our Five Eyes partners be as willing in a future Trump administration to pass us your crown jewel secrets, which you have done in the past? I don't know.
Exactly.
Okay, so I just wanted that to go on forever and ever and ever.
I'm beat.
I know. I'm actually hot and sweaty.
And it's not just the blanket fort. I mean, I am hot and sweaty because, damn, that was a great story.
I know. I think we should get him back.
Let's get him back.
Okay.
Looking for a new career? Welcome to Do HVAC Training Service Center in North Charleston. Enroll today in our comprehensive HVAC training hands-on field experience-based program, covering troubleshooting, maintenance, installation, and more on various HVAC systems and ductwork. We offer EPA and NATE preparation and testing, along with various certifications. Enjoy payment options. Achieve certification in under 5 months. Enroll now for your new journey of skill development and career advancement. Log on to dewhvactrainingsc.com to inquire.